But despite the sort of sad trajectory, the sad overall trajectory of the UFW, United Farm Workers Union, within that trajectory, there are countless inspiring moments and thousands of heroic people and wonderful examples of human solidarity and an epic struggle for justice that lasted 20 years, lasted a whole generation. And all of it deserves to be remembered.
So the union begins in I would say sort of an interesting way. What unites the farm workers, particularly in California, is their faith, right? They're Catholic. In an area that is where they're the minority, right? They're also immigrants or migrants. They don't have legal status because they are brought into the country on special visas, which means they have to be sponsored by employers, which means at any time the employer could send them back or just remove the sponsorship, right? So they do not have any permanency.
First of all, you don't speak and you don't write English, so you already you have the non-advantage. I was very scary for me, very very powerful when I realized I need to back to school to learn how talk, how you have to write it down, and the most important, listen.
And because the work was remote from view, it was in the fields, right? Not in the cities, not in the towns. One of the challenges that they had if they tried to organize was no one would see them. No one knew what was going on. And also the farm owners could blacklist or blackball the workers themselves, just never hire them again.
And it didn't work initially. It took creativity, it took imagination. They had to adapt, they had to adjust, they had to grow. There's elements of solidarity, there's elements of nonviolent civil disobedience.
The reality, I think, is that the workers themselves were, some of the most exploited workers in the United States. They were invisible in the fields, right? They were working under very poor conditions, right? It was a pretty abysmal existence, but it was the only one because also there was tremendous discrimination.
Well, at the time when I moved here, it was in 1993. I'm gonna say early 90s. Very hard times with that kind of government. All the doors I was closing for you because first of all they require a lot of paperwork sometimes because you age you don't have, and they request also the experience.
There's a lot to lose. The movement worked, but the story that's not told is how many people, although the movement may have worked, how many people lost their jobs and after the farm workers gained rights didn't get their jobs back. How many people over the course of the movement weren't able to put food on their table for their children and really suffered and sacrificed so that the larger movement could be successful. So you have a lot of poor people who had very thin margins, who put a lot on the line, everything on the line for it.
So it's like a wall after wall after wall.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about that particular Viva la Causa, farm worker movement with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta is that it was begun by sort of the Filipino workers in those grape growing fields, and it was really the sort of Mexican and Mexican American workers were hesitant to join at first. They felt as though they weren't ready. There was this feeling of we're not ready, and then finally the decision was made that no, now is the time.
Larry Itliong was president of the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, known as AWOC. Summer of '65, he began to talk about organizing, improving the working conditions, increasing the salaries.
We feel that we farm workers should have an organization of our own.
One of the things that most people forget is that it was the Filipinos in September 1965 who started the grape strike.
It begins with a strike at the Delano vineyards, the grape growing vineyards. But the strike starts to lose momentum. The strike is only doing so much. And the strike, although it gains some attention and puts pressure on a particular grower, it's not leading to the change that's needed.
Cesar Chavez, who is the major leader, he has a long history of activity in the fields and organization in the fields. So in the 60s and 70s, there was a series of grape boycotts. And that became well known because the folks could not buy grapes and support the workers, and that put pressure on the farm owners to settle contracts with the workers themselves.
So what the United Farm Workers were able to do is they were able to create a win-win, where they created the conditions by which everyone could benefit. And the way they did that ingeniously and creatively is with a seal, the United Farm Workers seal. Well, once they said, well, what can we do? Well, they said, well, if you concede if you meet us, if you negotiate with us, if you recognize our rights, we'll endorse your grapes and we'll put the United Farm Workers seal. Now everyone who's not buying table grapes, the consumers now have a win, because now they can go back and purchase what they want, but they can do it ethically.
The farm workers would boycott, protest, march, and fast their way to a collective bargaining agreement, which guaranteed field workers, among other things, increased pay and the right to unionize.
It's been a long way. For the last 29 years, I've been in New York City. I have a great opportunities in New York City. Like I will never change those kind of experience working with the best chefs. It's the best, really.